Hello, coaches, players, and parents. I'm grateful to be able to speak to you guys today. The topic I'd like to share today is motivation. So, to start off, I want to explain what is motivation. As you can see here, it is defined as an internal personality characteristic, an external influence, and a consequence or explanation for one's behavior. One thing I don't like about this is that it leaves a lot of vagueness. It's not necessarily pinpointed for us. So we'd like to try to fix that to make it a little bit easier for us to understand. So motivation operationally defined is the direction and intensity of one's effort. So what exactly is direction and intensity? Well, direction can be thought of as whether an individual seeks out, approaches, or may be attracted to a certain situation. Intensity can be thought of as how much effort an individual puts forth in a particular situation. So if I don't have any desire to play, or I'm getting pushed into playing with something, I wouldn't have direction or intensity. One thing that I feel affects our motivation so much in sports are what we call attributions. They are interpretations that people give for success or failure, or basically how they explain success or lack thereof. This can influence what we do in sports and how we think about things. It goes a lot along the lines with that quote, whether you think you've won or you think you've lost, you're right. There's categories of attributions. There's three of them. We're going to look at the first one, and it's called stability. Now, stability is the degree to which an individual attributes their success or failure to something, and this can be fairly permanent or unchanging. So basically, I will always win, I will always lose. Stable, say I will always win. Unstable could mean I will always lose. Locus of causality is the degree to which an individual believes a successful or unsuccessful outcome is caused by them rather than outside forces or an outside agent. Um, you could say that this could be something like, oh, I only lost that tennis match because the weather was bad. Or you could say, which would be an external locus of causality, or an internal locus of causality could say, I just lost because I suck. Locus of control is the degree to which an individual believes their success or failure is ultimately under their control. So basically, this comes down to, do I really have control over whether I win or lose? That would be in my control. Out of my control would say, well, no matter how good I am, I could always possibly lose and not actually win. So why are these so important, these attributions? Well, these attributions affect our expectations and our motivation. If I always, like I said, if we always expect to win or lose, we're probably going to be right. Um, this is why this is so important for us to learn to attribute things in the proper way so that we can help boost our motivation as well as our players and our children. All right, so I want to take a second and look at a real world example that we can use to apply these three categories of attributions to. Let's think for a moment about the Olympic runner Usain Bolt. Um, Now, as you're looking at this table, you'll see that it has stable and unstable attributions and a successful win and unsuccessful win. You see that there's different effects that can happen. Maybe in the quotation marks, you can see maybe some quotes that a player would tell themselves, maybe even just a student would tell themselves after a test or something. And underneath, you can see that some different, what these can do to your expectations or your motivations. Now, back to Usain Bolt, let's look at these three categories and kind of apply them in a way that makes it a little bit easier to understand for us. So let's imagine that Usain has just ran a race and he bolted to the finish line. So if we think in terms of stability, maybe a stable thing that Usain would tell himself would say something to the effect of, I won because of my freakish talent and hard work. I'll win again tomorrow if we line up and do it again. That sounds like Usain Bolt to me. Maybe an unstable thing he might even tell himself though is, I was lucky today. I had the race of my life. If we line up and do it again tomorrow, it might be a different outcome. So you can see the differences in these and how they will affect what a person wants, how their mind will react to different things. With Usain here, if he has that stable thing that he's just says I'm that good and I'm not going to lose, He's going to have that positive reinforcement to himself. Okay, so on the causality. So Usain could simply say to himself, if it's an internal causality, I won because I gave a tremendous effort. Or an external causality could be something to the effect of, I won because I was racing against a pretty weak field of competitors. So you can see the difference there. The internal attributes it to one's talent, one's ability, one's will to win, possibly. The external only attributes it to almost luck, it would seem. So now let's move on to the final category, control. If it's in one's control, Usain might simply tell himself something like, my race strategy was well planned out, and no one can beat me when I race my race. If it's out of his control, Usain would possibly tell himself, although I am the fastest man alive, someone else can beat me on any given day. Now you can see the difference there, how in his control, he is in control. He can decide the outcome. But when it's out of his control, he almost makes it appear as if he just got lucky again. All right, so to continue on with the example of Usain Bolt, I'd like to look at this real world example of his running a race and losing it to one of his own countrymen. Um, for you at home, go ahead and pause the video after I ask these couple of questions just to kind of reflect and see what you'd think. So, after you get done reading this, ask yourself, what were Usain's attributions for the loss? Were Usain's attributions stable or unstable, caused by internal or external reasons, in or out of his control? And then, given your answers to number two, how would Usain's current attributions affect his emotions and future motivation? All right, go ahead and pause the video and then play again. So, what I personally think is that this is an unstable thing. Usain acts like, it's just a fluke deal. This can't really happen again, especially if I wear my gold shoes. Whether it was caused by internal, external reasons, it looks like he attributes it to external reasons, because he says he didn't wear his gold shoes, and that's what made him lose. And then in or out of his control, it seems as though he attributes it to almost being out of his control because he didn't wear his shoes, and that seemed to make the biggest difference. Um, so I'd be interested to see what you guys' answers were. So, how would this affect his current attributions and emotions in the future? Well, we can obviously see that he's going to, by the way he says it, that he expects to win in London because he's going to have his lucky shoes on, which is the magic, which is his golden ticket to win. So, I'd like to talk about something else that's kind of a phenomenon that we have. It's called the self-serving bias. And what that is basically it's when we make attributions that help us increase or maintain our self-esteem and confidence in sport or in other things that we do. This could be something for success, like internal and stable, or for failure, like external and unstable. For success, we think of things at the picture on the bottom with Usain Bolt and the runner in the red. For success, Usain Bolt would probably be saying something internal and stable, like "I won because of my ability, and I can always win." For failure, we can see the guy in the red running, and he obviously is losing. He could be telling himself, "Well, I only lost because I never ran in that track before," and unstable. So it could be something like, "Oh, he just got lucky." Um, the self-serving bias is used to help us feel better about ourselves, to almost justify when we lose or win. It basically makes us feel better whether or not whichever outcome happens. As the picture on the right says, they failed the test, but they blame the pencil. That way, they don't put the blame on themselves. It's on something outside of themselves, so they don't feel the guilt for the loss. So something else I want to bring up is called learned helplessness. So this is a psychological state where people have learned that failure is basically something that's going to happen, that it's stable and out of their control. A good example would be something like when you grow up and you have a mom or a dad or an older brother and older sister hold you down and start tickling you, and as hard as you try to get out of their grasp, you can't. So you kind of just have to submit to whatever happens. There was an experiment done with dogs in a cage where they had the floor shock the dogs on one side, and there's two compartments to this cage, and they would have the floor shock where the dogs were at, and so they would jump to the other side of the cage where it wasn't shocking the floor. And then it got to a point where they would shock both sides. And instead of trying to jump back and forth, the dog would just lay down and take this shock. Learned helplessness in an athlete can be thought of as something. If this runner in the red down here always loses to Usain Bolt, the next time he lines up to race against him, he might be telling himself, "Well, I have no chance to win against Usain Bolt because he always beats me." Now you can see how the self-serving bias can help give us motivation or help increase our self-esteem to try again if we lose, or to help us feel even better about ourselves when we do win. Learned helplessness is kind of one of those things that just is a negative thing for an athlete to get to. If they get to that point, they're going to always feel helpless in the fact of trying to impress the coaches or make their parents happy or teachers or whoever. So this is definitely a state we'd like to try to avoid, especially when it comes to athletics. So I'd like to move in a different direction now and talk about the trophy generation, which is this generation coming up has been uh, known to be called as. So to go along with this trophy generation, the big thing now is rewards in sports. I know that a lot of people now do participation trophies, and there's people on both sides of the fence that agree and disagree with that. So I'd like to look at two aspects that have been studied with the rewards in sports or in just general, but especially sports. There's two aspects of rewards. There's the controlling and the informational aspect. So you can think of controlling aspect as something that kind of undermines their motivation, that kind of it controls them. So if you think about maybe a college football player that has a scholarship, maybe he doesn't like the sport because um, he just has kind of lost the love for it or is burned out or something. And then you have um, his parents so happy that he was able to get a scholarship. They were scared of how to pay for his schooling. So he knows that he has to stay on this team just to keep that scholarship to help pay for school. You can see how that has a kind of controlling atmosphere aspect about it on this player. The informational aspect helps to enhance the motivation. Um, you can think of a college baseball team. Um, Most don't have full scholarships to hand out like the football team does as much. There might only be one person that gets full scholarship. There might be one or two that get a three-quarter scholarship, and then a handful that possibly get a half tuition scholarship. Um, and then the rest of the players wouldn't get any sort of scholarship. There might possibly even be walk-ons. Now you can see how this is informational aspect. So if I'm the one player that got the full tuition scholarship, you can see how this would tell me that I'm important, that I must mean a lot. You can see how this is different than the controlling aspect. So basically, the critical factor to motivation with rewards is not necessarily the reward per se, but the person's interpretation of that reward. So up until the mid 70s, there was the belief that to increase motivation, all you had to do was give um, a reward to somebody who already loved the game. So as you can see below the little equation, you can see a little football player. He has an intrinsic motivation possibly. He loves to play this sport. He loves to get out there and play with his friends. And then he can have an extrinsic reward after. So maybe for every touchdown he wins, mom and dad will give him $5. And the belief was back then until the mid 70s that this increased motivation. So it's actually kind of a fun study that's been done that this is actually incorrect. So this is just kind of some food for thought. I want to ask that question. What if you had kids playing a sport because they loved it, then introduced intrinsic rewards? Like the little kids below, if you give them trophies, the scholarships in college, and a lot of money in sports and professional sports. What kind of effect do you think this has? So Richard M. Ryan has done a couple studies on scholarships and the effects they have on players and motivation. So the first study he did, he went around to a general college population of student athletes and asked them and gave out a little flyer or a questionnaire that talked about their motivation. And then they were able to actually get a list of who had scholarships. And the surprising thing that they found was that the students that had scholarships were actually less motivated than the kids that didn't have scholarships. And so this being kind of what we wouldn't expect normally because it went against what the beliefs were before the 70s, he went back again and he compared it by sports. So he compared football to the Olympic sports. and female athletes. So the Olympic sports could be like the track sports, then the gymnastics, and things such as that. And the surprising thing he found was that in football, the kids that had scholarships were less motivated than non-scholarships. But when it came to the Olympic sports and the female athletes, the ones that had scholarships were actually more motivated than those that didn't have scholarships. Um, I what An interesting thing to think about is what difference what was the difference in this? Um, so if you think about the difference, it's kind of like the football and baseball example I brought up previously. It's more of that informative um, reward that the Olympic kids are getting versus the scholarship kids in football. Most of the kids that play football do get scholarships to come play, and so this is like nothing new for somebody to get a scholarship in football. Whereas in the Olympic sports, it is a big deal if somebody actually gets a scholarship to come play with those. So you can see how the rewards that we give our kids, whether because of school, because of sports, or anything, can truly impact the motivation or how they interpret why they're getting it. So here's some strategies to enhance motivation. Um, we can help provide contingent positive reinforcement. This means if they just give a good effort or they do a good job, just let them know in a positive way. Defining success in a process oriented way. So this could be explaining that they need to work hard and have fun and do their job as a process, not just if they win, they're going to have fun. And then using small rewards as a symbol of achievement. Don't use a controlling factor when it comes to rewards. Have realistic expectations. If they won't ever be able to reach their expectations, then they're never going to be motivated or have fun. You could even phase out rewards. I know me personally back in high school, I always had fun just being able to play with my friends and go out there and play the sport that I loved. I didn't need rewards to make me feel good about it. Provide participants choice. This goes a lot along the lines with use a democratic leadership style. Let them have a choice in some of the drills. Maybe you have some things you want to get done in practice, but there's a couple ways to do it. Maybe give the players a choice to be able to do this. And they can help participants feel included. There's a couple ways to do that by showing respect for everybody and then giving them chances to get to know each other. I know that sometimes there's going to be some cliques that happens in high school and in the teams themselves, but by getting everybody to come and know each other and respect themselves, there can be a bigger bond of friendship and trust. So, what to do? So, I want to leave you guys with some challenges, some ideas that you guys can implement now. So, next time we meet, we can get together and discuss how these worked, what things didn't, how we could change them to mix them up a little bit. Um, so, let's go through these five little goals or ideas that I want you guys to try. So, the first one is emphasize process goals. So, these can help the young athletes, these can help them reframe success and failure so that aren't always labeling success as winning and failure as losing. Basically, we want to lose the whole if we lost, I'm a failure. If I'm a loser, I'm a loser. We want to get rid of that. We want them to start focusing on if I try my hardest, that's when it really counts. That's when I'm the winner. Monitor and alter feedback to give your athletes. So attributions that are made by parents and coaches have so much influence on an athlete's concept of success. We want to make sure that as parents and athletes, we aren't passing on negative feedback that gives these athletes the same idea that we talked about above, that if they lose, then they're a failure. We want to make sure to give positive feedback. If they try hard, let them know. Let them always talk about the good things that they did. And the third thing, assess and correct inappropriate attributions. So there's many athletes that attribute failure to low ability. They often tell themselves things such as, I stink, man, why did I even try? Coaches need to reshape these ability related attributions to effort related attributions. So basically, instead of saying, when I lose, it's because of my ability and it's my fault, coaches need to help make it an effort related attribution. And parents can help with this as well. Um, that if they gave 100% effort, that's what really counts. Number four, determine when competitive goals are appropriate. So we need to understand when it's appropriate to focus on individual improvement and when it's okay to focus on competing to win. Now, this can take consistent and repeated efforts. We want them to have fun. Now, obviously, winning is a lot more fun than losing. So that's a good goal to have, but we don't want to make it such a competitive goal that if we don't win, then they're a failure. We want them to actually focus on competitive goals, maybe within themselves, and that maybe they can improve in track. They can get PRs on their time and different things. So, number five states enhance feelings of competence and control. So, this is one of the best ways that we can foster motivation in athletes, and especially young athletes. So, we can do this by doing a couple of things. We can maximize involvement, getting them more involved. We can keep practices fun and process focused. Focus on the process, not if they winning, losing, what the record is. We can use appropriate feedback and reinforcement. So this means giving appropriate feedback, like we discussed in number two, and giving positive reinforcement that was discussed in the previous slide. And then finally, create individualized goals. Let the players know that they're individuals, that they're important on an individual scale to the coach and to you as parents. We need to help them refrain and reshape their thought processes, that they can stop these negative thoughts of "I stink," and they can actually change it into, "Man, I just need to try a little bit harder. I can do this." So I'd like to end off the presentation today by giving you guys an acronym I like to use when I want to think of ways to help increase motivation and help make a climate where motivation can be increased. And that's the TARGET acronym. So T is for task. So this can be things such as new drills, coming up with new ways and methods to improve the skills that you want to develop, making it fun, keeping kind of the kids on their toes. um, Authority for A. So that can be more going back to our democratic style, where you let the kids have a little bit of the decision power, help them feel more involved. It helps kind of build a team atmosphere as well. So R is for reward. So this kind of goes back to don't ever compare the kids to the other kids. This will kind of put them down and think that this person's better than I am, or things like that. And also, we want to focus on the more personal side. Look at them personally at their improvement. So the G is for grouping. So this helps kids to work together. You can give them certain tasks to help make them have to cooperate to actually accomplish certain tasks. This would help kids be able to build some camaraderie and actually helps build a stronger team relationship. E is for evaluation. So this we want to use to help focus on kids personally in their improvements. Evaluating them to show that their improvement, maybe their effort is increased, and to say how proud you are of them. This will help the kids to understand that you look at them as individuals and you respect them and acknowledge them as individuals and their efforts and their achievements. And then finally, T for timing. This is probably the most critical one. Parents and coaches are so critical to this process of knowing when the perfect time is to be able to implement these different strategies. Um, so, in closing, we always want to aim for our target. I'd like to thank you all for letting me come here and share this presentation. You have my contact information, and I look forward to meeting with you again.